following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
Yeah, so I read the two articles Brandon put out. I'm talking about Brandon, project lead at the Graph, Brandon Ramirez. The title of the post was the Graph in depth. So when I read the articles, I knew immediately that this was where I was going to spend my time and energy moving forward. I stuck around, and I think that's one of the best decisions I ever made.
We're like astronauts floating in the space of time.
Welcome to the GRTIQ podcast. Today I'm speaking with Jerry Okolo, a curator at the Graph. Jerry began the process of becoming a curator very early in the launch of the Curator program. I wanted to speak to Jerry after reading a few thoughtful articles he wrote on the topic of subgraphs. My conversation with Jerry details his interest in the Graph's Curator launch program, the nature of work curators will perform once curation services become fully active, and how he sees the Graph's role not only in the crypto space, but as an organizer of truth in the world. We recorded our conversation during the very early hours in Jerry's home country of Nigeria, and we got started by talking about what drew him toward the role of curator at the Graph.
I've always liked putting things in order. I've always liked being able to organize things and create order out of chaos. Because I think the world is a very noisy place, and for me, putting things in order and it makes the world easy to live in. So I think I've always had that in me, and I think in a way it called me. It was a perfect fit. So that was what drew me into it. The curating part of the Graph was about organizing and making things easy for people who want to build apps. So that was what drew me to it.
As I understand it, the work of curators is to stake GRT on subgraphs to signal to indexers which subgraphs are worth indexing. How do curators determine which subgraphs to signal on?
Okay, the way a curator decides which subgraph to signal on is what a curator will do if he wants to signal on. He first has to evaluate it by checking for correctness, checking for completeness, then checking if there are other subgraphs that are similar to it, and so on. There are a lot of articles about evaluating subgraphs. It will eventually be up to the curator to determine how deep they want to go in evaluating a subgraph. But the important things to check out for is correctness, completeness, if there are other, because you don't want to be building a subgraph that is already in the Explorer. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be signaling on subgraph that can provide the highest quality of data. So if there's a subgraph in the Explorer that is already doing that, then there's no point trying to create a new one. Those are the things you want to check out for the subgraphs that are made by the project team. So those projects will eventually be the source for the highest quality of data. So a curator is basically looking for correctness, is basically looking for completeness, and is basically looking for if a subgraph is production ready. So those are the things they look out for.
Naturally then, I'd like to have you define what a subgraph is.
A subgraph is an open API that listens to events on chain and tracks those events. So the way it works is as those events because an event could be anything. It could be an action, somebody minting a token, anything that involves an action that is being recorded on chain. So what the subgraph does is it listens to those events and tracks those events on chain and continuously scans new blocks on chain for those events and stores it in the graph node. So when somebody queries that subgraph, since the data is already in the graph node just serves those data quickly. So that's basically what a subgraph is. It listens for events on chain, tracks them and records them block by block, and saves them to the graph node, which is what the indexing is. So the indexing of the subgraph is just the graph node scanning each block for those information and saving it to the graph node. So when anybody queries that subgraph, the graph node serves that data to the user or to the dApp developer, whoever is requesting for those. Since the data is already on the graph node, it gets served quickly instead of trying to figure out where that information is at the time you're trying to request that data.
Curation services aren't currently fully active at the graph. So what are curators doing right now?
Right now, there's not much for curators to do, but I think that will change when curation goes live. Right now, it's just, okay, if you participated in the testnet, you already know what to expect when curation goes live. So it's basically just, we're just waiting for when it goes live to be able to really participate. But I'm sure a lot of curators already know the subgraphs they are going to signal on. But we don't know much about it now until when it's live, then we can participate. Yeah, so right now there's basically nothing to do. It's just to be in the community, try to help people in the community who are asking questions about curation and what to expect, how to evaluate subgraphs. So basically that's what curators are doing right now.
How do you describe what curators do or what a curator is?
There are two kinds of curators. There are technical curators and non-technical curators. So technical curators, they build and signal on subgraphs, while non-technical curators only signal on subgraphs. So the only difference is the building part. So if you are more technical and you know how to write code, you can build subgraphs. But non-technical curators, they just signal on subgraphs, but they don't build subgraphs. They signal on subgraphs other curators or other people have built.
I've never heard it described that way, but it's very interesting. So what kind of curator are you?
I'll call myself should I say up and coming technical curator, because I'm I'm building subgraphs from reading the docs, from like really knowing what is going on and the way subgraphs work and those kind of things. So I'll call myself a technical curator because I've built a subgraph, but at the same time, all this is new to me. Like I was one of those people who participated in the testnet. So it's just like everything I know is what I've learned from joining the graph, if that makes sense. I'm not coming as a developer, but I'm coming as someone who participated in the testnet, read the docs, really know what they are trying to build, and want to be a part of that. So I'm trying to participate as fully as I can, not just being a non-technical curator by just signaling on subgraph. I want to be in the active development of it.
So what happens when a curator comes across a subgraph that doesn't meet their quality standards?
Okay, for me, I'll typically leave it alone. I want to signal on the highest quality of data. To do that, my GRT is best spent on a subgraph that is more complete than a subgraph that is not well done. So when I come across a subgraph that is not correct or a subgraph that is not complete, I simply just move along to the next subgraph. Maybe it gets updated over time and I circle back to it, but you don't want to be signaling on the subgraph that is not correct or incomplete. You basically lose money doing that because when there's a 10% tax when you signal on subgraphs. So you need to know what you are doing before you actually signal on subgraphs. You don't want to be signaling on the subgraph that is poorly done. The way to do that is to focus our attention on subgraphs that will drive the most queries that are valuable to the network. So that's what we want to look out for.
Is it ever the case that multiple curators will signal on the same subgraph?
Multiple curators can signal on the same subgraph, but because it's on a bounding curve, at some point it becomes less profitable to signal on that subgraph because it becomes oversaturated. You have to go and find the next subgraph to signal on. So there's no limit to how many curators can signal on a subgraph, but at some point it just becomes unprofitable, because since it's on the bonding curve, like at some point it cannot go higher. It becomes less profitable.
What happens if a curator signals on a subgraph that an indexer ultimately decides not to index?
So index subgraphs requires compute power. So okay, let's say I signal on a subgraph that is poorly done. If the indexer looks at it and sees that, okay, this subgraph is poorly done, even though you signal on it, they may still not index it, because they may look at it as, okay, I'm going to spend this amount of compute power, index this subgraph, and this may not drive query volume to the network. So it becomes less profitable for the indexer to index, even though you're actually signaling on that subgraph, because the query volume, the business of an indexer is to serve queries to people who want to query the subgraphs they've indexed. So if they index a subgraph and there's no demand for that subgraph, nobody is trying to request or try to get information from that subgraph, then it becomes a waste of resources to actually index that subgraph. So even though you signal on it, they still have a decision to make if they should actually signal this or not. So it's not just, I've signaled on this subgraph, therefore you start indexing. I don't think it works like that. They still have to look at it to make the decision if they should actually index the subgraph, if the resources they are going to spend on it is worth it. At that point, it's up to the indexer to decide what is if this is a profitable thing to do.
Will there ever come a time when curators specialize in curating certain types of subgraphs or any other type of specializations?
No, I don't think so, because when you read the docs, there's a way to build subgraph. You can basically create a subgraph you can build subgraph for almost any project on chain. Now, we are doing the NFT subgraph call, where we're trying to create a standard for what an NFT, the way an NFT subgraph should be built. So they're trying to create a standard around that. Somebody who is trying to build a subgraph now will have to maybe conform to the standards they are trying to make. But there's no limitation to anything. You can basically create any subgraph you like, and there's no specialization when it comes to building subgraphs. If you can read the docs and you have a programming background, then you can basically create anything you want. At the end of the day, it will be the indexers that will have to decide if what you've built is worth indexing.
One theme of this podcast is to help members of the delegator community avoid indexers that might be considered bad actors. I'm curious if curators also have the same concerns.
I think is a problem everyone has to worry about, because anybody can be anything. Like, just because like I'm a curator doesn't mean I'm not a delegator. So it's the same if they are bad actors. Because just think about it. There's no way to identify you to link your Ethereum address to your role in the ecosystem. So there's no address saying, okay, this person delegating is a curator, or this person delegating is a delegator, or this person delegating is a founder, or whatever. It's still the same. It affects everybody. If a delegator gets screwed by an indexer, it could easily be anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is a curator and therefore they get more aware of how to deal with these delegators. The same rule applies to everybody. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's no way to say, okay, this person is a curator, therefore they don't get to experience that. But at the same time, I think curators, especially the ones that went through the testnet, they are less likely to get involved with a bad actor. Doesn't mean an indexer can't change in the future, but it's easier because if you've been in the community for long, it's easier to know the people to delegate to, that you can sleep. Like, I can go to bed at night knowing that I've been seeing this guy right from the testnet, and I know like he's really dedicated and he has really helped the community. So those are the kind of people I want to the people I delegated to. I don't really know, like I don't really know what they are trying to do, because there's a kind of trust, because I see them in the community every time, and I feel like my GRT is in safe hands. But I can totally see it from the point of somebody who's just like, who doesn't know these people, and you just come in, maybe you're trying to a pin or something. But yeah, if an indexer becomes a bad actor, his actions is going to affect everybody who is delegating, regardless of whether they've been known there for a long time. It doesn't really matter. It affects everybody.
As a delegator, then, how do you go about selecting which indexers to work with?
Before we started this call, I looked at my allocations, the people I allocated to. Though I know them in the community, maybe not. I don't know them personally, but I see them in the community. They are well known in the community. Nothing has been happening for the past, I think for the past 45 days. I've been seeing the same rewards for the past 5 weeks. Even though this is somebody I know, if you get what I mean, I see them in the community. So I guess another thing to do is to spread your bets in a way that even if one person doesn't perform the way you want, the other ones can really make up for it. Hi, this is Jerry Okolo. I'm a curator at The Graph. If my conversation with the GRT IQ podcast has been helpful to you, then please consider supporting future episodes by becoming a subscriber. Visit grtiq.com/podcast for more information. That's grtiq.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.
GRTIQ
Should members of the delegator community have the expectation that they might earn more rewards once curation services go live?
I think they will earn more. That's the way I'm seeing it, because obviously nobody knows how curation works. Even during the testnet, there was no curation. So we don't really know what it will look like when the curation starts. But thinking about it, like knowing the ecosystem and thinking about it, the query volume means indexers are doing business and they are earning rewards for the business they do. So when the curation goes live, as long as people use the graph and there are more subgraphs being indexed, then it makes sense that everybody will benefit from it, because those query volumes that the graph is doing, those will potentially be rewards for everybody. I think everybody is going to benefit from it. Curators, indexers, delegators, as long as there are people actually requesting for those data and paying for it. So I think that's when that's the main event. When the indexers start indexing more subgraphs, that's when we'll start seeing the ecosystem flourish. So I think everybody is going to benefit from it.
So why does it appear there are so few curators right now?
And I think that's because Signal isn't live yet. I think that we are over 2,000 people that participated in the testnet. If 10% of those people stayed behind, and that's over 200 people. So I think there are a lot of curators. We're not seeing them because, or maybe they are not active in the community. But I think everybody is waiting for when signaling goes live. And again, once signaling goes live, I think we see a flood of new curators. I'm sure there are delegators who want to curate as well. And that's the beauty of it. You are not tied to one role. You can contribute however you want. Your performance will be based on how correct you are in the decisions you make and the actions you take. So subgraphs like Uniswap or Synthetic or SWAP, they're a great way for delegators to really get a feel for how curation works, because those projects are well known. So there's little evaluation that needs to be done. Oh, this subgraph, Uniswap built it. What more do you need? You get what I mean? So it's very easy, because if you look at the current Explorer, you'll see that the subgraphs that were made by the teams, like if you look at Uniswap, Synthetics, those subgraphs, it was the Uniswap team that built their subgraph. It was Synthetics that built their subgraph. And if you look at the Explorer, those subgraphs are curated. You find them at the top. They are featured on the Explorer. So it's very easy for delegators to signal on those subgraphs to get a feel for how it works. And again, there are hundreds of articles that were written by curators during the testnet on how to identify and evaluate good subgraphs. And I'm sure there will be new articles on how curation works when it goes live. This will bring in new participants, and I think is one the delegator community will be looking out for, because once those things go live, then a delegator is now a curator as long as they have GRT. You get what I mean? So it's really open for everybody, and we'll start seeing a lot of curators when this thing go live.
What's your advice to members of the delegator community that might want to become a curator?
I think they should participate. It's up to us to make sure all the information of the world gets preserved in a way that's easily accessible, open, and reusable over time. And I think that's a great thing for anyone to be a part of. You are basically being rewarded for being honest, and like that's something that I think is amazing. And I think everyone should be a part of that. Indexers are happy to serve truth. Delegators are happy to stand behind truth by delegating to indexers that are indexing and serving accurate data. And curators are happy to organize truth, and all participants have skin in the game as a representation of their convictions. As the network grows, there will always be room for more curators, because events are unfolding, and it will be up to us to organize it.
So what's your advice for delegators that want to get more involved in the graph community and in the work of curators?
I think delegators should, if they really have the time though, they should learn how to build subgraphs. I think there's potentially a lot of opportunities there, because as this thing gets bigger and bigger, I think there'll be a lot of demand for subgraph developers. And if you read the graph docs, it's very well detailed, and so they've really made it easy for anybody to just pick up the docs and play with building subgraphs. Even though it's not production grade, but at least it will even help you understand how to evaluate subgraphs, because if you actually spend the time building one, then it's easier to really know what they are trying to do, what the whole ecosystem is about, and what's really happening behind the scenes. So it will really help you identify which subgraphs, because there are other kinds of subgraphs that you can build. It doesn't necessarily mean that you only want to signal on Uniswap subgraph or synthetic subgraph. Those subgraphs are going to be oversaturated. But there are other subgraphs that are equally valuable, but they may not be from project teams. Because there's one subgraphs in particular. That subgraph tracks all ERC 721 tokens. So that kind of subgraph is not what you will expect a project like Synthetics to build. It's something that a subgraph developer or a curator want to build that they think will be valuable for the ecosystem. So those kind of things are the things that learning how to build a subgraph and really testing it out, seeing for yourself if it's something that you want to spend your time on. So I think it will not only help you know which subgraphs are of high quality, but also help you in building unique subgraphs that could be valuable to the ecosystem. And the beauty of it is, if you build that kind of subgraph, you get to be the first person who signals on it. It's like minting your own token and putting it on Uniswap before anybody buys it. You are going to, I see a lot of opportunities there. And I think delegators who already know how to code, they are going to have a lot of advantage when they read the docs. But the doc is one of the best docs I've seen since I've been in crypto. It's so well done. And again, there are videos online by the team where they talk about building subgraphs. So I know the delegators, they come from different places. If they are looking for a change of career, and if they are looking for how they want to spend their time moving forward, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. You can basically build a subgraph, and it pays you forever if it's true, is correct, is very valuable. A lot of people are actually using it. Then it's going to trend upwards, and you get to even spend your time on maybe even building more subgraphs, or spend your time however you want. So I think delegators should not be intimidated by the docs.
How important do you think delegators are to the future of the graph?
Yeah, delegators, they help in securing the network. I think they also help in the decentralization of it. At least that's the way I think about it, because delegation is I don't want to say easiest thing you could do, because you still have to know what you are doing in terms of who you need to, because if as we are just talking about, delegating to the wrong indexer, you could get burned. So delegation is like the delegation is something that is the easiest for the typical holder to do. It's like the entry level role. Let me put it like that. I'm not trying to belittle it, but it's like the easiest thing to do with your GRT the moment you get it. So you get your GRT, okay, let me delegate it and earn rewards from it. So I think they help with the decentralization of the network, because as the holders of these tokens increase, there's a potential for more delegators to come into the network. And another thing I think about is, this is just my thinking, is if there's ever a case where somebody in the community that a delegator trusts, maybe for instance, now let's say 50% of, which is very unlikely, but let's say 50% of indexers start acting in a way that isn't in the best interest of delegators. Delegators can pool their funds, find somebody that they trust in the community, and because you need 100,000 GRT to become an indexer. So the more people holding the tokens, now I'm calling them delegators now, and the more people holding the tokens means that they are not tied to a specific indexer. So if let's say 50% of indexers start acting in a way that delegators don't like, then they can pool their funds and look for somebody to give 100,000 GRT to run a node, if that makes sense. So that's just my own thinking. But I don't know if this makes sense, at least in the real world sense. But I've always thought about it that way. Delegators, they have a lot of power in terms of the decentralization of the protocol, in the sense that they can easily find new indexers to delegate their GRT to. Even though you need 100,000 GRT to be an indexer, delegators can always find who they really trust, or who they believe has their best interest at heart. So even if that person doesn't have 100,000 GRT, they can easily get it for them. I think that's one thing I think delegators can do with their GRT. So more holders means there's a possibility that they can easily just move their funds around and find who they actually trust. If things are not really going well for them, or if a large number of indexers start acting in a way that they don't want. At least that's the way I think about it. But I don't know if this is something that is practical in the real world. But I've always thought about something like that.
How did you first get involved in crypto?
I first heard about crypto during the last cycle. I was one of those people who got in late December 2017. When the bear market came in 2018, I panicked and sold everything, all the tokens I bought. So even though it felt like the right thing to do at the time, I knew at the back of my mind that something wasn't right here, and that I needed to find new information. One book that really opened my eyes to the possibility of blockchain technology was The Truth Machine. The book came out in 2018. The book made me realize that crypto wasn't all about speculation, that there's actually something being built here. I'm from Nigeria, and as an artist, working with clients overseas was always a pain because of geo restrictions from services like PayPal. So, like PayPal, in Nigeria, you cannot receive money from people abroad. You can only send payments via PayPal. So this was the issue I had as an artist in Nigeria. I could not receive payments from clients abroad. I've always wondered why these restrictions were put in place, but never made any sense to me. And these restrictions could be found in many areas, not just being able to receive payments. Now, the idea that with just an Ethereum address, I can travel around the internet at the speed of light, carrying value as I travel, exchange and receive value from other people without a central authority, felt really empowering to me. Yeah, so I've always wanted to be part of that, but there wasn't much I could do back then, because although we had them CryptoKitties, but then it was mostly just ICOs. So in July 2020, during DeFi summer, I started giving the crypto space a lot more attention. I really went deep into it. I really immersed myself. I found out that the ecosystem had really matured from what it was in 2018. Because then I started seeing those things that I read about in the Truth Machine, like being used. It was no longer theoretical. So projects like 3box for identity, then Uniswap for borderless and permissionless trades. So I started seeing those projects like being used. It was then I found the graph. I think July, the same July 2020. I found the graph on Twitter. I remember the tweet I read. The guy was saying it was saying how great it was and how it saved him a lot of time during development. Like I'm all for efficiency now, so I went down that rabbit hole. Yeah, so I read the two articles Brandon put out. I'm talking about Brandon, project lead at the graph, Brandon Ramirez. Yeah, the title of the post was the graph in depth. So when I read the articles, I knew immediately that this was where I was going to spend my time and energy moving forward. I stuck around, and I think that's one of the best decisions I ever made.
How popular is crypto in your home country of Nigeria?
I think it's very popular among young people, but most of the people I talk to is the speculation part of it, which is like, oh, I'm going to buy it low, I'm going to wait. Nobody really talks about the technology part of it. I'm sure there are people out there, but at least the people I've met, it's usually about let me buy low and sell high, but nobody ever talks about like what's being built here and what the implications of what they are trying to build here. So I mean, I have people I do talk to that can relate with what's being built, but it's mostly buying and selling. There's no love for the tech, at least the people I've talked to.
Do you think crypto has the power to address poverty in Nigeria and across the world?
Yeah, I actually think crypto is going to lift a lot of people out of poverty. Because if you think about it, like, I don't know, I think it was on Twitter, I can't remember, was it Ava that was saying and was talking about permissionless jobs. I see in Nigeria where young people are LPs, they are liquidity providers, and they just provide liquidity and they make a living off that. You understand? If you look at the graph now, there are a lot. We have like 3 rows: delegators, curators, and indexers. So think about all the projects that are on Ethereum. There are a lot of jobs that are being created right now, and it's just a matter of time before people start figuring it out that, oh, there's actually something here, and like you can actually contribute in these communities and be part of them and actually make a living for yourself. So I think it's just a matter of time before we start seeing something like this, and I'm very excited about it because it will keep a lot of people occupied, and because it's actually very interesting, like all this like talking about it, like it's just very I find it very interesting, and I think it's going to take some time, but to eventually get there.
So what's your long-term vision for the graph?
The graph is about making data open and accessible, and at a protocol level is designed to reward truth. As a curator, if you signal on a subgraph that isn't well made and maybe the subgraph isn't producing accurate information, over time nobody's going to use it, because if people are going to use your subgraph for their DApp, they will eventually want to make sure that this information and this subgraph I'm using, is it actually providing the right information? So when that happens, they will stop using it, or it will not be used. And all the people signaling on that subgraph, they're going to end up losing the value of their GRT, because there will be nobody using it. There will be no query volume. There will be no use for it, because the information is providing is not true. So it's going to trend downwards, if that makes sense. But a subgraph that is serving truth is going to trend upwards, because people who are using it, if the subgraph is providing the correct information, then they are going to continue paying the query fees for that data they are using for their DApp. And it is a positive reinforcement as long as it's used and the people using it continue using it, then more people are going to use that and they are going to keep using it. And at some point, what we're going to have left are all the subgraphs that are actually providing accurate information. The ones that are not providing accurate or correct information are just going to fade into oblivion. So when I mean the graph is a source of truth, is The protocol is designed in a way that you are being rewarded for being honest. If you are not honest, and honest in this sense is this subgraph I'm trying to signal on, is it actually correct? Is it actually accurate? Does it provide the correct information? Like those are the things you have to ask yourself before signaling on it, because by signaling on it, you're basically saying, okay, I believe this information is correct, and I know it's going to be valuable for the network, and I'm ready to put my GRT where my mouth is. So when you do that, you say it's correct, then even if it gets indexed, the moment of truth is still going to come out that, oh, this thing is not actually correct. Nobody's going to use it. So by doing that, you are basically saying, in the eyes of the protocol, you are basically lying, even if you are being deliberate about it or not. So the protocol is designed to reward honesty, whether you know what you are doing or not. The protocol doesn't know. Over time, it's going to trend. It's going to become less used, and if it becomes less used, nobody's going to want to signal on it, and indexers may not even index it, or if at all they index it, it's not a good thing for them to hold, or it's not, DApp developers are not actually using it, then there's no point for them holding it. There's no point for them serving that data to anybody. So everybody is acting in their self-interest there, but at the end of the day, a truth wins. Let me put it like that. The truth will eventually come out, because nobody's going to continue paying for something that is not giving them what they want. It's like paying for something and you're not getting what you paid for. You're eventually going to move on from it or find something else. So that's the way it is. And all the people who signaled on it are in a way not being honest or not being. And if you look at it, it's still true, because if you don't evaluate a subgraph correctly, then you are being dishonest, because you are basically signaling on it, saying this information is correct, it's going to be valuable, but you didn't really know what you were doing, and you just like signaled on it. And so that's what I mean by the go-to source for truth.
So it sounds like you think the graph can change the world.
I think it's already changing the way information is stored and shared. And it's also changing the way we participate on the internet. If you look at the monthly query volume, it is a testament to that. I see the graph as being a go-to source for truth. As more people around the world come to participate on the network, either by being a delegator, a curator, or an indexer, we'll see the graph become even more dominant. One thing I really like that the graph is doing is the way it involves other projects in discussion. Is very inclusive. So if you look at the subgraph community core, you find developers like developers from Zora, Rarible, and so on. And it's important for setting a standard that everyone is on board with. So I see the graph as the go-to source for truth.
Do you think there are any challenges ahead for the graph?
I think, first off, something like this has never been done at scale. So we're basically on the edge of this thing, like we're basically on the edge, and this is all unfolding. And the graph's greatest challenge is the unknown, which is true with just about anything. And another area will be governance. But I don't think that's a bad thing per se, because pushing through challenges is how we evolve. Disagreements are a sign that, at least from how I see it, disagreements is a sign that we have a truly decentralized community, and we eventually move past any disagreements we have, and I think we'll eventually learn from it and evolve as a result of that. So maybe problem is too strong a word, but I see it as both a challenge and a good thing at the same time, because I think that, I don't know, I just feel like if everything goes smoothly, then we're not really pushing ourselves and we're not really trying to move to the next level. So I think governance is one thing, because we're never always going to agree with everything, but at the end of the day, we will eventually move past it and learn from it and evolve as a result of it. So that's what I think in terms of the challenges ahead, which I think is a good thing.
Jerry, thank you so much for your time explaining what curators do and your vision for the graph. If listeners want to learn more about you, what's the best way to stay in touch?
And they can visit my website at jerryokolo.com. That is JERRY okolo.com.
This has been a production of the GRT IQ podcast. You can find additional information, including detailed show notes, by visiting grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review. GRT.